think I've got a model boobs now, don't I? I think I've got a model boobs now. For a while now, even before my transplant, I've felt like 3D graphics inspired by Nintendo 64 and PlayStation games have mostly been explored. Now it's become a style mostly synonymous with indie horror. The problem for me is that, well, Suburban was never a horror game to begin with. It's an RPG with horror themes, sort of like how Bloodborne has horror themes, or Left 4 Dead, or these clowns. I really hate these clowns, so I've decided to up the fidelity of my characters to that of the Sega Dreamcast. It was a neat little console in a neat little space and time before the GameCube and PS2 were released. The plan going forward is to add on to these old character models by giving their body shapes more definition. Up to now, my models have had fairly rectangular shapes to their bodies and limbs. That's because up to now I've been working with models that were limited to just 690 polygons. That was the upper limit that I'd given myself, and that sounds like a lot as is, but it really isn't, like, at all. With the Dreamcast, however, developers were able to play around with a lot more file space and a lot more processing power. Like, over twice as much processing power, and 4 times the RAM. I'll still be going for these segmented meshes with these aesthetic inspirations drawn from games like Mega Man Legends and Skies of Arcadia. They're just gonna look a little better now. Now we're working with up to 1001 polygons. Remember that for later, 1001. But why 1001 exactly, and shouldn't the poly count be over twice as much? It's mostly because Sonic the Hedgehog's model has the largest poly count that I can find on the Dreamcast at 1001. As for why that count isn't somewhere around like 1400, you have to remember that your model wasn't the only thing being rendered at like any given time. Your stages had higher quality set dressing. You had these cars, you had people, and you had more of all of that than you did on the N64 and PlayStation. There's a lot to cover, and we will cover it, just later in the video. The big thing right now, with low poly 3D objects, is that you have to imply curvature with your limitations. Think of points on a parabola, for example. Now for posterity's sake, and because there is this looming possibility that I will get rid of Devlog 1 now that I've updated the models, we should actually talk about the characters again. I figured the best direction to go with actually visually designing these characters was to draw some inspiration from media that I enjoyed. I had a lot of fun with Terry's design, the main character, but I think it's kind of really easy to make a character look iconic by just giving them a red cap. Max was a little tricky at first. I considered making him an effete dude, really girly, but then I decided that it'd be more fun to have a character that girls liked hanging around with. He would be fashionable. He just happened to like investigating the occult on the side. Daisuke was actually a character I had originally designed for a different game altogether, one that I might go back to one day. But in Suburban, he's a young English teacher that's looking out for his students. He's caring, he's considerate. And this last character, Olivia, was originally heavily inspired by Maria Renard from Castlevania Rondo of Blood, the best Castlevania game. But she's in a weird spot on the gameplay design side of things. While the plan was to make her fight with like doves and a pet cat, there has never ever been an RPG where a Beastmaster class was actually good or fun. It's always been cool in concept, but never in execution. Now she'll be providing stat support, which is still a huge deal for how the game plays. For the first stretch of the modeling process, I needed to be sure that everything would work out. I didn't actually record much footage of me modeling Terry as a result. He was my test model, and it came out really well. I was actually really happy with the results, and I was excited to work with everyone else afterwards. I did get a couple problems on the way through though. Previous triangulated faces that I was forced to delete and redo. You can see it pretty well with Daisuke's model, where the seams on his trousers are sort of missing. That being said though, the one that caused the most trouble for me was Olivia for, well, a number of reasons. This part's a little geometry heavy, but there's a good chance you'll learn something neat. There's lots of 3D geometry theory. It's very interesting, and, well, frankly, I've never actually taken 3D math in college. It's something that you can sort of just learn on your own. Like I said before, you need to imply curvature with your limited resources in low poly 3D, and boobs are no exception. But it's a little trickier to imply that sort of curvature with something that's like less than a third of the size of like the rest of your torso. That's where the trie comes into play. See, polygons are any single face on a 3D object. That could be a 3-vertex trie, a 4-vertex quad, or really any number of vertices as long as it makes a shape. Game developers rely on the trie because it's a coplanar shape, and your GPU relies on the rasterization of coplanar shapes. To put it more simply, a triangle can't make a complex shape in 3D space, and your GPU likes not having to make complex shapes in 3D space. But what does that have to do with boobs, you might ask? Well, you can split a shape and make it bend in or out. It's good practice to triangulate manually where it's really necessary. This rule, of course, doesn't just apply to the chest or the main body. And now, with Olivia's model done, we'll be finished sprucing up all these models. Wait, I'm one over? Jesus, what am I gonna do now? Nah, I'm just kidding. I got some polygons inside Olivia's bun that I can get rid of, and some others here and there. We're good. Of course, I'm not done fixing stuff yet, because her model causes me the most trouble every time, but I'll be covering that in the next video, where I've got to rig and animate. Be good until then, and I'll see you in the next video.